Well, hello there once more to the Magic Morning Wood with me, Ron, and him.
Live. Wait. Sure. Okay. Hi.
And as is our wont, we will discuss some films, and we are following the algorithmic pattern. And what did we talk about last? Well, I'll tell you. It was Cisco Pike.
Oh, right. There it is. Okay.
Right.
It's a long time ago.
Both chose one film apiece, reacting to that. I shall go first, and
Okay.
I went with wannabe musician forced into a life of crime.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's a good title.
Yeah.
Want to be a musician for the life of crime is the title. No. What's the title of the movie? Ron?
It's Clive, I'll tell you, it's The Harder They Come, Jamaica's first feature film from 1972, directed by Perry Henzell, and a major cult film in its day. I think this was one of the original midnight movies, along with things like El Topo and stuff like that. It played for years and years and years as a midnight movie, and has gained a rather large cult reputation, which is kind of maintained. I think it's still one of the big cult hitters. One you'd not seen before, Ron?
No.
Kidok.
You had seen it before?
Yes, long time favorite of mine. So stars reggae singer Jimmy Cliff. It seems like I get the feeling he might have been born in Kingston, but he's been sent to live in the country, right, with his grandmother. Returns to Kingston because his grandmother's died and hasn't left any money. So basically, he's come to make it big in the city, and is immediately taken advantage of by people. And what he really wants to do is he wants to record a song, right? He wants to make a record. Turns out everyone in Kingston wants to make a record.
Right.
And
is this like a contemporary of Bob Marley, or is this after? Is this around the same time, or is pre Bob Marley or after Bob Marley?
Well, Jimmy Cliff, I would say, was contemporary. Yeah.
Right. But at the time of this movie, was Bob Marley big at this time?
Well, it was still the Wailers, right?
The Wailers.
Yeah.
So he was in the Wailers at this point?
Yeah. I don't think, I'm not sure. Yeah, no, I don't think he would have crossed over into it. I think he was still Bob Marley and the Wailers. Hang on, it's a good question. I didn't think to look that up. Let me look it up. When was what's the crossover? I guess Burnin is the one.
Well, it says here his years he was active was 62 to 80. So he was fairly big at that time, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying because Burnin was 73, so the year after this.
In 72 he signed with CBS Records.
Right.
So he was pretty big at that point. So he's got
on the way up, I would say. Yeah.
So. Okay, anyway.
But still Bob Marley and the Wailers as opposed to just Bob Marley, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yes, and he goes to work for a preacher, this very pious man who doesn't like him because he's making time with the preacher's kind of adopted daughter, who the preacher might have an eye on himself, right? It seems. And gets ripped. He does eventually get to make a record, but gets ripped off by the producer.
$20.
Gets into some ganja selling. Kind of gets ripped off there as well. Basically, gets ripped off left, right, and center, really, and eventually ends up as an outlaw a murderer, an outlaw, and yeah, as he flees from the police, and his outlaw status means that his song becomes a huge hit. So he finally does make it, but he's on the run, and spoilers, eventually gets gunned down by the police. Vaguely, well, kind of based on a real character from the 40s, right? A guy called Ryging, who was like the original rude boy, right? And mixed with, I sense a little bit of Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Back's Badass song, right? Would have been a hit 2 years before, I'm guessing. So I'm thinking that might have been a big influence on the film. And yeah, it's a fairly straightforward story trajectory. He becomes kind of like a bit of a folk hero, I guess, character, outlaw, but they don't kind of whitewash him either. He's not necessarily super sympathetic. I mean, you have some sympathy with him, but he's not really overly so, right? Like, he's kind of a bit of a dick as well, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, some of his problems that you can rest at his own feet.
Yeah,
right.
It's his own, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's more than anything else. I think it's especially when it was new. No one had seen Jamaica on screen like this before.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and you've got the whole, well, Jamaica in general, but also the whole the musical background. That stuff is fascinating as well. And you've got some real music. You got something I'd never noticed before. Prince Buster is in it very briefly. He plays like a DJ at a sound system, and his voice is so distinctive. Like, he comes out and he's like, "You're gonna play the record now," and I was like, "Fuck, is that Prince Buster?" I had to look it up because I've no idea what Prince Buster looks like. I've never seen a picture of it, but I just recognized the voice, and lo and behold, it was Prince Buster. And yeah, Toots and the Maytals turn up, and yeah, so it's all, there's a lot of local color, right? I think is part of the appeal of the film, more than just the story itself, right? And he goes to, there's a great scene where they go and watch Django in a movie theater, and it's very raucous kind of audience, and there's a callback to that at the end where he imagines himself as the gun-toting hero. And yeah, so that's The Harder They Come. I'm very curious, actually. I was wondering, because I saw this for the first time like 25 years ago or something, so I feel that's still slightly in the shadow of its original kind of cult status, right? So, but seeing as you'd never seen it before, and it's 50 years on from when it came, I was kind of curious, someone coming to it for the first time, if it would still play the same way, or So what did you make of The Harder They Come?
Well, I mean, first of all, great title. I mean, it's like sounds like something out of straight off of the X-rated shelf, right? So, but
recently,
I was expecting it to be a porn when you signed it. So,
well, recently there's that kind of there's The Answer, The Harder They Come, there's that Western, right? The Black Ass Western with Idris Elba. The Harder They Fall.
How Do They Fall?
Which I've not seen actually yet, but looks kind of like it might be quite a fun Western. Did you see that? You keep up to date with big?
No, not that one. Yeah, I'd say I got along fine with this movie. Yeah, so it was as I think I texted. I don't know if you had to, but I texted you that I had to find another copy of it because I needed subtitles for this movie. It's
right, okay.
Yeah.
I think it did originally play in theaters with subtitles. Yeah,
because even with the subtitles, I'd be like listening along and reading along and be like, I can't understand how that's what they're saying. Like,
oh, really?
It's So, eventually, you kind of get. It's kind of like I likened it a little bit to when I read Irvine Welsh. Yeah, is that you like at first you're like, what? It's just like gibberish, and then you kind of get into the rhythm where you start to get a feel for how it sounds and how it feels, and then it's sort of like you read it kind of smooth. So by the end of the movie, I was getting along fine with it, but it takes you a while to kind of adjust to the pronunciation of it. So did you, were you okay with it? Did you understand everything?
I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen this. I don't remember seeing it with subtitles, but maybe when I first saw it, maybe it did have. I didn't have subtitles this time. No, I don't know. I mean, I know what you mean. I probably didn't catch each and every word, but at no point was I confused as to what was going on.
What was happening? Yeah. I mean, generally it was all pretty standard. I think in general it was it was pretty. I mean, by today's standards, it's a pretty standard story, but I'm sure it was pretty groundbreaking at the time, especially for the first big Jamaican movie, and having like a real I guess like a Breaking Bad kind of story, right? With like this guy comes to make good and then falls into corruption. So it was. I'm sure it wasn't. I mean, it's not like it was completely new, but it was probably quite different at the time, right? So I'm sure it was
an old story with a new coat of paint, I guess.
Yeah. So good for them. And Jimmy Cliff, even though he's a musician, did a really, quite a good job in the acting and stuff like that. I mean, I know he's not really an actor, but
he's a good.
He was very solid, very believable. I was surprised that he would be willing to do that because, I mean, him being a musician already, you would think that he might be worried about it actually getting mixed up with his real life, or people thinking that that's really about him, because it was. I mean, obviously he's not a criminal, or I don't know if he is or not, but I don't think he is. I don't think he is, but I mean, you get the impression that he could be just telling his own story.
Yeah,
because being a reggae musician, right? So
which is testament to his performance in a way, because I know what you mean. I think the first time because some people would have had not exactly so, but I mentioned Prince Buster, for example. I think he did definitely come from the streets and did did get involved in some criminal stuff. But yeah, Jimmy Cliff was pretty squeaky clean, compared to some of his contemporaries. I don't think he was in any way, shape, or form a rude boy for any length of time. I don't think.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but he pulls it off. Yeah.
So good for him for pulling it off and having the balls to do it, and because I'm sure like American audiences, for example, or British audiences wouldn't know that it wasn't him, or that it wasn't his story, right? So so good for him for having the balls to do it, and good. It was pretty good. It was it was very solid storytelling. I thought it was it was gripping. The pacing was good. It was well written, and the only, if I had to, one kind of small gripe about it was that I thought maybe his fall was a little bit fast. It kind of like he was just sort of like he's selling weed and now he's killing 3 cops. It was just really like, whoa, like it was just really, really sudden. It was just a little bit it fell too far, too fast a little bit. So, but and then I was a little unsure because they had these one thing that I was a little confused about was like they had these sort of like interspaced cuttings of him being like facing consequences or being punished, where he was like whipped with like a cane and stuff. But it wasn't. I mean, it was him, but it wasn't really entirely clear that this was happening now, and like there didn't seem to be any like sort of like there wasn't like, oh, my back, or oh, I really hurt now. It was just sort of like he was doing it and then really, really fast, whip, and then it was just on to the next scene. It was almost like it was very strangely cut in that case. It was like where.
I think actually the version we're seeing, oddly enough, because you always assume when you get a new HD upgrade, I think this is actually a bit cut from. I was reading, I think with the original theatrical did have a few, and since I saw it, I think there were some stuff missing. As for instance, when they go to the theater to see Django, I think that's a little bit longer, and they're also watching like an old Jimmy Cagney film. That's missing. I don't know if it's because of rights issues. And yeah, that whipping scene as well, I seem to remember, has some full frontal nudity from Jimmy Cliff. So that might be something to do with
why it was cut and stuff, and why it was because it felt very kind of like it was almost like a dream sequence or something. It was just sort of like suddenly he's getting whipped, and there's like a voiceover saying like, oh well, you're not going to go to jail, but you're going to get punished. And then it was just on to the next thing. And it wasn't ever talked about again or even referred to like he was in pain. I think it was just sort of like I was like, well, that was really weird. And then there was another scene, sort of that later too, I think, I can't remember the other one, but it was just sort of like these kind of random intersplicings of things which weren't really connected to. So that was a little strange, but other than that, I wish they'd had a little bit of a more gradual fall into Damnation, I guess, whatever. But overall, it was pretty enjoyable watch, and I thought
aside, I'd say it's a very accomplished film for a first film, especially. I mean,
for a country's first film,
he's basically creating the film industry as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Loads of like really good. I was really impressed by some of the location works. Really good with him. Like, there's like some foot chases through like shanty towns and stuff, and all that stuff. I mean, I can't imagine there was much in the way of, crowd control and guerrilla filmmaking, right?
Really.
So that stuff's all really well done. The one thing we didn't mention, which we should, I suppose, is an important part of the film's appeal around the world.
Song.
The soundtrack, yeah,
of course, So
the soundtrack's fantastic. I mean,
I mean, I was singing that. I mean, of course that song is really famous. I mean, I know that song, and I don't really listen to reggae, but there's like it's been like covered several times. Like I think I even have like a punk cover of that song somewhere, right? So so it's and of course you're singing that song to yourself for the next 3 days or whatever. I sang myself for 3 days, but it's amazing that he wrote that song just for this movie, right? So like this is back in the days when songs from movies became like really, really famous. They don't do that as much anymore these days, I find, but but definitely like writing a song for a movie and then it becomes really, really famous, so.
You mentioned punk as well, and of course this the Clash song, The Guns of Brixton, as well, has a reference to this film.
Oh, right, okay.
Right. And again, Prince Buster, I think Prince Buster wrote a song called Ryging about the original guy whose name was also Ivanhoe. His character's name is Ivanhoe. Right.
Ivanhoe, yeah.
But great stuff. You got 007, Shantytown, Desmond Decker, Scotty's cover of Draw Your Brakes, Toots and the Maytals, Pressure. I mean, just banger after banger after banger, right? Like some really fucking good stuff on this.
Soundtrack.
And I think that was a big deal back in the day as well. Was one of the, because I guess a lot of people hadn't heard reggae yet.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It was definitely one of the
probably introduced to reggae to a lot of people who had never heard of it before. Before.
So when you think about it in that, it kind of makes sense that it wasn't just a good film; it was like a whole package, right?
Right.
That would have been
introducing Jamaica and its culture to the rest of the world, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And Perry Hensel had apparently spent a bit of time at the BBC, which is something I didn't realize until I looked it up this time. He had worked there briefly. Script co-written by Trevor D. Roan, who I think was a playwright who went on to make another Jamaican film called Smile Orange from 1976, which is also has a bit of a cult following, but it's a film I've never really got on with. Alleged comedy that I never really found particularly funny, a bit of a parody of or a satire on the Jamaican tourist industry, if I remember correctly. I may have to. Speaking of which, Jimmy Cliff, if you remember, one of his, because he didn't have that many film credits, unfortunately. Do you remember that film, Club Med, from like the mid 80s?
Okay, sounds vaguely familiar.
I think it's a Harold Ramis film, and there's like
Robin
Williams in it, maybe, and
vaguely familiar,
and Jimmy Cliff's that's one of his other credits.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. I haven't seen that film since it was new. I don't remember anything about Club Med at all.
I don't. The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't think I ever saw it. So I saw it.
Could be funny. I don't know. I have
not Club Med. I think it's called Club Paradise.
Club Paradise. Thank you. Yes,
there it is. That's why.
Yeah.
Peter O'Toole, Rick Moranis.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, the last thing we watched with those two in Moranis and Peter O'Toole was High Spirits, right? So that doesn't bode well. Was Rick
Moranis in High Spirits?
Maybe he should have been. It's a fucking film. Rick Moranis should be in. It's that kind of thing.
No, he wasn't. No, Rick Moranis is my hero. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah, from the
Little maybe he wasn't in High School. Who was in? Was it Steve? Good.
Steve Guttenberg was. Yeah, Steve Guttenberg. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So and Perry Henzell for a long time as well. I think he was part of that one and done director, but he did actually make another film. Straight after this, he started making a film whose name escapes me now, because it never no place to hide or something like that, because it I don't think it was properly completed. Like I think
No Place Like Home.
There we go. And then I think he abandoned it in like 1981, but it came out in 2006 eventually. I've never seen it, but it sounds quite interesting. It stars PJ Souls as well of Rock and Roll High School fame.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm
Halloween
to see that. Yeah. But for now we've got Harder They Come. Oh good. So we both like this film.
Yeah. I got on with it.
Chris Blackwell of Island Records, an uncredited executive producer. I suppose the one slightly thing that surprises me a little bit is I mean, I'm surprised the Jamaican film industry never really got any bigger, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I know of movies that are set in Jamaica, but I couldn't tell you another Jamaican movie.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sure there are some, but
there's one other really good. I might even prefer it to the Harder. There's one other really good kind of with the reggae industry as its backdrop called Rockers. That's really good. I would recommend Rockers. And then a good triple. So the other reggae film, classic, is a British film though, is Babylon, which is about the sound system scene in the UK. So that would be a terrific triple bill, Harder They Come, Rockers and Babylon. But Rockers is really good. Yeah, and then other than that, I struggle to think of like any I mean, sometimes like there seem to be like direct-to-video like action or gangster films come out every now and again.
Right.
But no, I don't know. It never seems to have blossomed into a big industry, right?
Well, too bad for them. Yeah.
Yes, but at least they have. At least they've got this. They've got the Harder They Come.
Right. So good choice. Nice to see it.
Yeah, good. I'm pleased you. Enjoyed it. Right. So, what did you choose, and what's your connection with Cisco Pike?
So I went through Harry Dean Stanton, and I chose Harry Dean Stanton's final movie, Lucky, from 2017.
He was in. I think he was in a couple of other things, right? But kind of last big starring, and quite rare.
Yeah, it was.
He didn't really have that many starring roles, right, at all.
I think the other ones were all done like posthumously, or like he was in like the it's called Frank and Ava.
Yeah, was this the last shot, do you think?
But I think he had filmed it years, but like I think it was like a delayed one. Yeah, so I believe that this movie came out like the month after he died or something.
Oh, okay. It certainly feels like a farewell, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and the movie itself is almost like him saying goodbye. It was almost like it was written and produced for him to have farewell piece. It was almost like it was very kind of meta in that way. It was like you could tell that the actor himself was saying goodbye, and it really was a goodbye. Yeah, so he died on September 15th, and it was released on October 6th. So it was like 3 weeks later it was released after he died. So yeah.
As well, it feels much in the way that Nebraska was very much built around Stern as well. I get the feeling that this wasn't like something they wrote and then wondered, who shall we cast? I get the feeling
it was written for Harry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So directed by John Carroll Lynch, which is kind of interesting because I don't know, I'm not sure what else he hasn't really directed that much. I mean, this was the only thing he's directed. He directed another like short film, like 3 minutes long, but this is the only feature thing he's ever filmed. Has ever done, and I mean he's mostly he's an actor, right? So he's
known as a character. It's funny, I don't know why, because he's been in quite a lot of things. I've seen him all over the place, but for some odd reason, whenever I think of John Carroll Lynch, I think of him as Frances McDormand's husband in Fargo.
Right, yeah.
Always.
Well, sometimes some of those character actors, no matter how many things they do, there's always just that one piece that you remember them for, even if it's not particularly memorable. Just, it's the guy from that thing, 20 years ago. Right?
It's odd. I don't know why, because it's even one of his earlier credits, and you hardly see him. And for some reason, it's just him getting up to make her eggs before she has to.
I think it's just whenever you sort of recognize or become aware of that actor, I think that's sort of where you recognize them from. So it's interestingly, what's his name? What's the Swedish guy from Fargo?
Peter Stormare.
Peter Stormare, yeah. So I think I told you that I saw him in Japan once,
Nice.
like 70s, and I think his like his handle or his like online Twitter address or something is like blonde guy from Fargo or something like that. That's his like his like online thing. So I think that maybe he knows that kind of thing.
Didn't you see him in like Hello Kitty World or something?
No, I saw him at like a water park at Yomiuri-land. Yeah.
But his missus is Japanese, right? And he's
I think so. Yeah, so
he's half Japanese or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so written by Logan Sparks, who I think had also only wrote this, is the only thing he ever wrote. So also kind of interesting that way. And some guy named Drago Subonja, who also died soon after this.
Oh, is that right?
He in 2020 anyway. So and he also only wrote this. So this is the only project ever written by these two writers, and the only thing directed by this director. So it was obviously, I'm assuming they all know Harry Dean Stanton. They all got together and said, hey, let's do like a farewell. Harry's like, I don't think I got much time left. So like, hey, let's make a project for you. And like, let's just send you off.
As well, I think in the case of Harry Dean Stanton as well, it would have been one of those very rare cases where he's the only other one that jumps out is Paris, Texas, right?
Right, as a lead, right? Yeah, so
which he kind of shares with Natasha Kinski, but there might be one or two other ones, but no, but this is a rare chance for him to
be a lead, right? Of course, yeah. Sure, yeah. Is it first time viewing for you for this one?
No, I had actually seen this when it came out. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, more than anything else, I mean, we'll get into you can tell the story and as for what it is, but the one thing that jumped out at me the first time I saw this film, and I pretty much had the same feeling this time, and this is neither a criticism or this is just, unavoidable, I think. Like, I was wondering if you thought the same thing. This feels like an indie film from the 90s. Like
it really, I agree with that. Yeah. So
I was, the first time I was watching, I was thinking, Steve Buscemi is bound to enter frame at any point.
It really does feel like Steve. Yeah, I totally get to see. Yeah, it's like, it definitely Steve Buscemi's just off camera.
Yeah, I'm sure he must have at least visited the set.
That's good. Yeah. But it's got cameos by or supporting roles by none other than David Lynch. David Lynch,
and a substantial part for him, really.
Yeah. Ron Livingston, Ed Begley Jr., Tom Skerritt, Barry Shabaka Henley. Henley, Beth Grant, so etc. A lot of I'm sure a lot of his friends that kind of, hey, let's give Harry a send off, right? Kind of thing. It felt like a let's get together and help Harry do like one last thing before he goes, kind of thing, right? So
like that. And to be honest, Ron Livingston in general seems like a man who is living an eternal 90s indie film.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's another example of no matter what Ron Livingston does, he'll always be the guy from Office Space for me. So yeah,
right.
Yeah.
He's good. I mean, I in general I like him as well, but yeah, like you say, it's such a strong imprint. Yeah, just imagine him getting high and watching kung fu films in bed with Jennifer Aniston, right? That's
exactly right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So anyway, it's there's not a lot of story here. It's basically just a guy. He's like in his he's 90, and he's just sort of like coming to the end of his life, and just sort of like it's sort of like his daily life, and he sort of has this almost, it's like it says the synopsis says it's a spiritual journey, and just like with the quirky characters that inhabit his off the map desert town, right? Which is stuff the IMDb summary. So yeah, so it's just a bunch of him with a bunch of quirky people and going on with his day, and just
is he supposed to be in his 90s? Is he?
It says he's 90 years old, and it says Lucky follows the spiritual journey of a 90-year-old atheist.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out, because at a certain point when he bumps into Dom Skerritt, they get talking about World War II, right? So I was trying to figure out how old he was exactly, because at times, because of the 90s flavor as well, because you don't really see anyone use like modern devices or anything. It could almost be set in the 90s, right?
Could be, yeah. But apparently
that wouldn't work in the timeline if he'd be a little bit too old to have been at World War II then, right?
Well, apparently he actually was in World War II, in actuality, like actual Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah,
he actually was a cook, like what they talked about in the script. He actually was a cook in World War II. So so I think a lot of that was kind of lifted from his life and stuff. So anyway, he's just sort of like he's kind of like he's like the guy that everybody knows. He kind of does his daily routine. He does the same thing every day. He eats at the same place, and he does his yoga exercises in the morning, and he does the same coffee. And then he sort of has this sort of one day he wakes up and kind of falls over and has this sort of like kind of fainting spell. And doctor's like, well, you're 90. It's just like you're getting close to the end. That's what happens, right? So it's just him kind of coming to terms with death, basically, right? So in reality and on screen, and coming to terms with it at the end of his life, and looking back on what he's done, and just kind of interacting with people. And
his doctor is Ed Begley Jr. And I like the doctor he plays because he's one of those rare film doctors who actually like seems like a proper decent, like, because one of the things is he chain smokes, right? He chain smokes.
Yeah.
And Ed Begley Jr. character says, well, I'm not going to tell you to stop because it's like
stopping will probably stopping will probably kill you, right?
And I thought, you know what, that kind of makes sense. And it's interesting because I don't think doctors are supposed to say that anymore.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of true in some people's cases. So
yeah. The shock, the withdrawal probably would just make him keel over, right? So that's
absolutely.
But yeah, so he's just kind of this, but you think he's just kind of like this kind of, he's a little bit cantankerous and but he's also very kind of well read and really kind of like thoughtful, and he you kind of think you have his character kind of pegged, but then he comes out with these like real like bits of wisdom, and kind of like he has a much larger vocabulary than you would expect someone of this kind of ilk to be. And like so he's a little bit upends your expectations of what this kind of character would be, this kind of old cowboy guy in the middle of nowhere, living in the middle of nowhere. But and he has like, and it's quite funny. There's a lot of like, one of the kind of the highlights is when every day he walks down the street and he passes this kind of mysterious place with like a yellow arch, and he kind of looks in and he yells guns like as hard as he can every single day. It's like part of his routine. You're like, what is happening here? And then you don't even see it till the very end, where it finally turns the camera around, and it's just this sort of like little oasis garden with like fountains and Cupid fountains, and he's just yelling guns at them every day for you don't really know why, but it's just you kind of say that's got to be, that's the kind of guy he is.
And David Lynch's Tortoise has run away.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And
President Roosevelt.
Yeah, President Roosevelt. Yeah, and so you hear talk about that a lot, right? And then you see he shows up at the end as this kind of the cliff, the twist ending with the tortoise walks by.
The only part of the film I think that deviates a little bit and feels a little bit Lynchian, like it's fairly straightforward with this indie vibe, and it's not particularly enigmatic or it's not. But then there's one sequence where a character walks off down an alley bathed in red, and follows him and goes down some stairs and sees something. And that's never explained. And you almost wonder, is that character dead? Was he like called to death or something? But
well, and then Lucky actually follows him, and then he's not there. It's just empty, right? Yeah. So,
but that scene seems a little bit like, I don't know. It seems a little bit out of place, because I either expect none of that or a little bit more of it.
Right. Yeah.
It's an odd sequence.
Right.
And for me is kind of an indication of. I mean, the thing with this film is it feels very. Overall, I quite enjoyed watching it. It's not it's not an unenjoyable watch, but it does feel a little bit like it's been like directed in segments, like it, and it doesn't necessarily hold together. Like, this bit's cool, that bit's good, and that bit like that. But I don't know if it really comes together. It doesn't necessarily cohere as a piece, right? Which is another thing which feels very 90s indie about it, right? It's just,
right.
Here's some like a Jim Jarmusch film or something like that.
Right, yeah. Or like Living in Oblivion, whatever.
Yeah. It's got so again, that's not, and I'm wondering for people who are not us, who kind of grew up and saw that stuff this first time round and kind of are either nostalgic for it or are fed up with it or whatever. I'm wondering how it would play to younger audiences who are maybe unfamiliar with that style of filmmaking. Would it seem, would it seem odd, or would it seem refreshing because they've never seen anything like that before? Or do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Curious about that.
Right. Yeah. So you overall you enjoyed it? Anything?
Yeah, to be honest, when you chose it, I was like, I only just watched. If I feel as if I only just watched this and I wasn't overly impressed, so I thought it might be a chore, but actually it was. It actually grew on me a little bit this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it grew. There's something about it. There's a little bit more to it. I dismissed it a bit as it's a bit of a throwback to the 90s, but there's something a bit more there, I think. I might even watch it again one day.
Really?
You never know. How about you, Ron? First time watch for you, or?
Yeah, it was my first time watch, and I think you, if you like Harry Dean Stanton, and who doesn't like Harry Dean Stanton, I think you have to have some kind of like even if you don't really like this kind of filmmaking or this or this, I think you have to have sort of like a I don't know how to put it, like a positive feeling toward it, even if it's sort of like, good old Harry, that's good for Harry that he got to have that, at the end kind of thing, right? It's sort of like you have to have kind of a positive attitude for him as an actor, and the fact that he kind of got to do this at the end, and it's almost like it felt almost like I don't know, I want to say an obituary, but it's like it was he probably had something to do with the creation of this, right? So it was just like, let's all get together and give Harry one final send off, and it's hard to be negative towards it because that's what it is. I mean, like it's almost like you'd be negative towards a dead guy. It's almost like it was almost like offensive to not like this movie in some way, right? They pick it apart, because it's sort of like you're picking him apart.
You'll be like walking up and kicking President Roosevelt or something like that.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So I mean, I think it was, it definitely, I didn't actually think about it, but now that you mentioned the 90s indie connection, definitely it feels like that. Maybe that'll be, because this will be our linking. Maybe next episode we'll just pick all 90s indies. That could be our week connection to their next episode.
I don't know. That still feels very close in time somehow.
Right, yeah.
Quite ready for the 90s nostalgia yet.
Right,
Although it does seem to be a thing for some people, right, already. Too soon for me, but
90s that was my era, so I'm always good to revisit the 90s.
And you get to see him sing in Spanish.
Yeah,
well. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that play to his strength. It's like a showcase or a
exactly. Yeah, it's a showcase. Yeah. So yeah.
So no, I know what you mean. There's a certain goodwill.
Goodwill. That was the word I was looking for. Goodwill. Yeah. So
yeah, even if it's not necessarily like earth-shakingly different or something like that. And like I said, I kind of got on with it a little bit better the second time, which I didn't expect. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else interesting. I mean, there's little bits that are kind of like, for instance, there's a bit where they watch Liberace on television. He talks about like, oh, I didn't get it, and now I realize this man's amazing. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's kind of like a throwaway thing, but it's there for a reason, right?
Right.
And I think that's the thing, is it might be one of those films where certain things might click for you later on down the road or something.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of, yeah, a quietly interesting little film. And like you said, yeah, if you like Harry Dean, then you should definitely give it a go, because there's so few Harry Dean vehicles.
Starring vehicles. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
like I said, the only other one I can think of is Paris, Texas, which is a better film, but you know, but he does share the limelight there a little bit.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, well, I'm glad he got to have that at the end before he left and before he went, and yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good little watch. It was definitely not at all a drag, and it was very amusing, and I laughed out loud a few times. So yeah, I enjoyed it. So
it's also got I saw that really like on the set. It's got Johnny Cash singing Bonnie Prince Billy's "I See a Darkness,"
right,
which also has Bonnie Prince on it doing backing vocals. I really like that song. Actually makes me think of you now and again for some reason. That song.
Why is that?
I don't know. You and some other people. I think it's the things about, you know, my unbeaten brother and stuff like that. It's very romance.
I have a darkness within me.
Homosocial. Well, I'm thinking that me more than.
I see.
Yeah, but I'm sure we both do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's definitely an interesting sort of meditation on mortality and like reflection on life and what it means to be alive and what it means, and death, you know, kind of stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of stuff and just an amusing little slice of life, kind of like indie quirky characters, then yeah, it's worth a watch.
It's very slight as well. It's like a cobweb or something, and I think that might be the reason I enjoyed it a bit more the second time, because I think first time you're underwhelmed maybe, but then coming back to it, if you know that's what it is, then then you're slightly more set up for not expecting, so you just kind of pick the things in it that are of interest, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Be interesting to see if John Carroll Lynch would ever direct another feature. I wonder what he would come up with next.
I mean, it's been 6 years now and still nothing, so hopefully he'll do something. But
I think he's working on the Lucky Director's Cut, which runs just 30 seconds longer, and then just as the tortoise walks out of frame, Steve Buscemi walks in, and he's like, "Did I make it in time? Ah, shit!" And then the film ends.
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay, I guess we're done here. Until next time, which will be our Halloween special, where the algorithm machine gets turned off and the pumpkin machine is turned on. Is that right? Something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Slash the pumpkins.
Right.
Right.
Until then.
All right.
Sure.
Ooh. See ya.